everyone, and welcome back to another discussion on board with Chitalayam. And today we're going to be talking about prejudice. So we still have a question that we're going to ask to get to know everybody on the panel. And today that question is, what is a word you have learned recently? Uh, and I'll go first. My name is Ilakkiya, and the word that I learned recently is defenestration, which is a word I heard while watching a Minecraft video. This YouTuber said this word and he explained what it meant. And I read the comments of this video, which explained it, and it was pretty hilarious. So defenestration is one word that means to throw someone out of a window. So you can say, I'm going to defenestrate you in terms of I'm going to throw you out of this window in like an act of rage or annoyance. And to throw oneself out of a window is called auto defenestration. So that's what I learned recently. How about you, Akshay?
Firstly, I definitely wouldn't have guessed that. The word doesn't sound like it, but okay, that is what it is, and I'll take it. And then for like my thing, so I haven't really learned any new English words, but at least like not anything I remember lately. But I've been doing this new thing where to trick like some of my strangers or like acquaintances. I'm just like learning like random sentences in like a bunch of languages. For example, like doing an introduction in Korean would be 안녕하세요, Akshayo, Bangavo, and but like with a different accent and stuff. And then with the Spanish, it's like right after I can be like encantada, cuídate, which is like nice to meet you, take care of yourself. And then I can go with Tamil, நீங்க நல்லா இருக்கீங்களா அது மட்டும் தான் எனக்கு வேணும், which is like you're doing well, right? And that's all I want. And so I've been sort of like doing a bunch of these languages, and it's been fun. I haven't played the prank on anyone yet, but probably saying it on YouTube to everyone probably didn't wasn't the right thing to do. But we'll see how it goes.
Sounds good. Hopefully, a lot of you are watching and you know Akshay. So, we're gonna jump right into the topic for today, which is prejudice. So, what is prejudice? What are we talking about?
This is actually a good question because with prejudice is something that everybody uses a lot, and so because of that they do think that we don't understand what it is. And I hope while I'm answering this question, I understand what it means. So prejudice is any time where you assume that this is something good or bad without rational thought on the current instance. So something that you've already thought out earlier, and then just believing that nothing has changed. And whether you actually thought out earlier or not is like can happen or might not happen. But the important point is the prejudice happens in the sense that you're not going to think whether this is a good thing or a bad thing in that moment. And that's the way I see it. How do you see it, Ilakkiya?
That's pretty similar to what I would say. Prejudice is kind of thinking or assuming something about people before really knowing them. And I was looking up some more specific definitions of the word as well. And they define prejudice as an assumption you make about someone based on their perceived group membership. So you assume some part of their identity in terms of what they belong to. And based on that, you have some preconceived judgments or ideas about it. And that prejudice is considered an attitude. So it has all three components of an attitude, which are the affective, behavioral, and cognitive components of an attitude. So to break those down, the affective component is a person's emotions or feelings about the attitude object, which in this case would be the person or their perceived group membership. So it's how you feel about them. Behavioral component, which is the influence on the way you act or behave towards the attitude object, and cognitive component, which is a person's belief or knowledge about the attitude object, which in prejudice, oftentimes, just like you said, Akshay, before you've even met someone, before really knowing them or having any experiences with that person or that group in general, you have some thoughts or beliefs about that. So prejudice meets all three of these categories.
That's actually a very comprehensive answer. So I'm glad you said all that. And so with that, let's go to the next question, which is how does prejudice relate to discrimination and stereotypes?
Uh, I feel like those three kind of fall in the same ballpark of things, and so therefore are really easily confused. And I still think the lines between them are a bit hazy, but prejudice is what we've defined so far. Discrimination is it's when you act on your attitude. So prejudice can just be a belief. You may not necessarily do anything about it, but discrimination is the act of acting against on it. And generally, discrimination is negative. So you're doing things or acting in a way or behaving with someone in a way that is detrimental or negative towards them. It's not positive generally. So, say, for example, you could be prejudiced against people who like pineapple on their pizza, but discrimination would mean that you stop inviting them to their parties or you throw their pizza out the window, um, things like that. So that would be actually acting on it. So that's what makes discrimination different from prejudice. And stereotypes are similar, where stereotypes are just the concepts of what you know about a different group. They're vague generalizations about groups and are just quick ways to evaluate the world around you. Um, and sometimes they're based on experience, sometimes not. But uh, I think that's so stereotypes are more conceptual, discrimination is more action based, uh, and prejudice is how you believe or act on those stereotypes. So that's how I would separate those out. What do you think, Akshay?
You've given good definitions. So like I'll just like add stuff to it. So the way I see it, it's like sort of like let's say it's a three-step ladder. So so stereotypes is like the first thing, which is not what you think, but like what the society that you live in thinks, or it could be it could be an online community, it could be the state you live in, or the country you live in, or whatever. But essentially, like what their beliefs are, what the orthodox definition that they give to certain things. And if everybody believes that like pineapple on pizza is a bad thing, it doesn't matter if you have eaten if ever had a pineapple pizza. Essentially, the stereotype is uh, pineapple on pizza is bad, and then so prejudice is a continuation of it by saying, yeah, I've heard that like the stereotype with this is that pineapple and pizza don't go together. So that is like the prejudice part. And then the third step, like on that ladder, is like the discrimination, where you see someone eat pineapple with a pizza, and then you rate them as a person with a very bad taste, and never ask them, and just like treat them very differently because you know that their taste is terrible, because you've seen it firsthand, and even otherwise, even if you don't meet those people, just randomly, casually saying remarks like, "Oh my God, at least we're not people. It's not like we're people who eat pineapple on pizza," and just making those remarks. And so, like the biggest part is like, if exposure to if you have never eaten the pineapple on pizza, that sort of thing, you've never had exposure to it, so you don't know whether it's good or not. And because of that, stereotypes plays a huge role on the prejudice that you hold. Whereas if you've eaten pineapple on pizza like yourself, then stereotype might not play a huge role because you have your own inputs that you can evaluate. And actually, I can even give another example, which is in America, like or actually, maybe not America. In like some countries, they did this research, and I can put this on the description, which is they gave the like a bunch of resumes where the resumes had the exact same words, but then the name was different, and because the names were different, some names did better and like went to the next round, whereas some names were rejected right off the bat, and that said a lot about the prejudice and the bias that people sometimes hold.
That is a really good example. That shows how they're prejudiced about different groups based on their perceived, like their name. You assume something about who they are as a person based on their name, and then you discriminate based on it. So that's a really good example. And just to set the record straight, I love pineapple on pizza. Pineapple and jalapeno on pizza is a superior combination. So going to the next question. So prejudice is, since it's just a belief that you have, you may not necessarily act on it. It is easy to form, and many people have prejudices about many different things. So, given that it is such a common attitude or an attitude pattern that people have, why do so many of us have it? Did it serve any purpose from an evolutionary standpoint?
I think it does. It definitely does. And the thing is, uh, as I said earlier, with like the definition of prejudice, is that every time if you have to think about something, then of course, like a lot of things does need critical thinking. It needs nuance. But then, if literally everything in the world needs it, then it's a problem. For example, let's say I am sitting below a fan. If every single second I'm thinking is a fan going to fall on me, then that's a problem. I need to just assume that the fan is properly fixed and it's not going to fall on me, and I can just go about my day and assuming that this is not going to happen. And this is the same way that we build a lot of prejudice, as I said, with the nature and the nurture. But then, depending on your life experiences and like depending on like who you're exposed to, or what you're exposed to, and what you're not exposed to, or who you're not exposed to, you build a lot of these prejudice and assumptions. And one example I can say is like in terms of school, right? Like teachers have their favorite students, and sometimes when you hear something, they probably assume that like let's say somebody got in trouble, they would just in a second they would assume it's a problem child, and it's not for the lack of a better word goody two shoes. uh, but the thing is, when you haven't learned who it is, you should ask whether like who did it and why did they do it. And sometimes we again make prejudice with once we hear like what they did wrong, we don't really ask why they did it. And so evolutionary, in terms of evolutionary standpoint, like we were we couldn't ask questions every single time, because if we had to ask questions literally every single time, it's sort of thing where anytime a stranger is going, hey, are you going to crash onto me? Or so there are certain questions you have to understand that you can't keep asking yourself. You have to assume that it's not. And in that sense, sometimes we also make the wrong assumptions, and that's why there's like sometimes unfair prejudice, and especially if it deals with people.
Yeah, pretty good explanation. And I would kind of agree along the lines of it is hard to always ask and know before something's happening. So you just need to make a decision at the moment. And having a belief or thoughts about a group of people might make it easier for you to decide how to act or what to do in a scenario. For example, when I was younger, my mom told me if you're ever alone or you feel like you're in danger and you need to get support, um, reach out to any woman in the area. Reach out to women who are with children in the area. They're people that you can probably get help from you're more likely to get help from them. So that was, I guess, a prejudice that my mom had, and I was taught as well that if you're in danger, you're the people you're more likely to get help from. So in those kind of ways, prejudice could help you survive better in making decisions about what's more likely to help you in a scenario based on what's around you. So that definitely makes sense.
And because you asked me on an evolutionary standpoint, why don't I ask you like the same question, but like from the psychological standpoint? What purpose did prejudice serve from a psychological standpoint?
Wonderful question, Akshay. So something that I was reading about is what are some of the ways that we form prejudice? And one of the examples was that we form prejudice to conform with social norms. So if the place that you are a part of has certain prejudices, you are more likely to adopt those prejudices to fit in to that scenario better. So one of the examples that the website had, let me see if I can find it. So immigrants to a country they became more prejudiced the longer they were in that country, and they basically conformed to the cultural norm of prejudice against the Black population in that country. So it's kind of a way of fitting in, which is kind of similarly tied to evolutionary standpoint in terms of we are social animals, we want to be accepted, and if you're not accepted in the group, it decreases your chances of survival. So from a psychological standpoint, to feel the need to feel accepted, you would form prejudices to fit in better with the groups that you are a part of. And additionally, it helps you perhaps not make the same mistake twice, although you could be making a new mistake by holding on to a prejudice formed by a previous experience. So those are
Yeah,
some
I
of the things.
definitely agree. Yeah, I definitely agree, and like I think this is a good segue to sort of understand what implicit bias is. And implicit bias is essentially the place that you grew up in, wherever you grew up in. Like if the society that you lived in has certain biases, because you lived in the same society, you would also unconsciously have those biases. That's why it's called implicit bias. And what that means is when you take decisions unconsciously, not consciously, where you exactly know what variables you're using. Sometimes, like with gut decisions and things like that, you might still be holding on to those biases, and that's why like people like nurses and doctors, they all go through something called an implicit training, so that they're able to help people irrespective of who they are, and their unconscious bias shouldn't be a factor.
For sure. That makes point. That makes sense. So something that we can then think about is, can there be positive prejudice? Can it be helpful in a scenario? Similar to the example of how my mom told me, like, if you're in danger, do this. I guess that is a positive prejudice for women and women with children in the scenario that I was taught. So can there be positive prejudice? Is that a thing?
I think so. Yes, definitely. So, I mean, firstly, like with the fan example, like that is a positive prejudice because you're able to live life without thinking, like, like how can I get injured or like something like that. But even in terms of people, for example, in Ilakkiya's example, you were able to do that. And for me, I mean, I was never told that, but I used to ask. I remember in fifth grade or sixth grade, I don't remember when exactly it was, fifth standard or sixth standard. I essentially, I had a phone with me, which is like the Nokia phone. So you can't really do a lot. You can still call people, and you will always have charge on that phone. So it was a perfect phone for like what I was going to do, which was essentially I told my mom that like I want to just go somewhere and like, like I'll take the phone with me. I'll try to come back on the same path. If I'm not able to come back, I'll call you so you can tell me the way to do it. And because of that, I took the phone. I went like a long way. It was a 40 minute like cycle ride. Uh, and the thing is, I tried to come back, but then I later understood that I sort of went on a one way. I can't
Mhm.
really come back. And at first, I asked a few questions around people and just like people in general. And I had a prejudice that these people would be able to help me. These people are lovely people. They are people that I can trust. That like, they're not gonna like kidnap me. They're going to help me and they're going to solve the situation for me. And that is a prejudice that I had. And because like, they didn't prove to me that they're gonna be helpful. Uh, so that was like one experience, and then of course right after they told me, also called my mother, she told me the way, and then that's how I got home. And similarly, like, when I broke my hand, right after I broke my hand, like, people came together and then they put a cloth over my hand to make sure nothing happens. And at that time, I could have been like, hey, don't touch my hand. But in fact, it's broken. Don't infect it. I could have done all those things. But I had the prejudice that, hey, they're trying to help. They're probably doing the right thing. So let them help me. And these are times where there is a positive prejudice. So prejudice is not a negative thing. It's just that when prejudice is a negative thing, you need to do something about it.
Yeah, and I guess a good indicator of that would be the morality, that morals, I guess, in the situation to figure out whether a prejudice you're having is a good one or a bad one. And similar to the example I gave earlier, and even what based off of what you're saying, Akshay, I would say positive prejudice is probable, although we generally do hear about the word in a negative context and how it is harmful to other people or your by making quick judgments or having beliefs about it. But sometimes it can be helpful in terms of who you reach out to get help from, feeling safe and comfortable in a situation. Thinking about the different components of prejudice, the affective component of the attitude, which is how you feel about the thing. I think it reminded me of friends. Like if you have friends and you're going through something tough, you're likely to share it with them compared to someone who's not your friend because you have a understanding of how they make you feel, how strong or long your relationship has been, and those things can help you form a positive prejudice that this is someone who might listen to me. But in the end, prejudice is still an assumption, and it's sometimes not great to make assumptions, but they can be helpful for times of stress or quick decisions as well. So I believe positive prejudice can be a thing.
Definitely. And all right, I would like to add one more point to this, which is there is a research, again, I can put it on the description, which is, like it doesn't say, you will never be able to change or anything like that, because change is the inevitable thing that's always constant. But the thing is, if you have done something in the past, you're more likely to be able to do the same thing. And when I say do, I can say achieve something, or I can say do something stupid. So my words really matter there. But essentially, let's say you had the habit of, say, like running every day, say, but you had it like last year, and then you have because of the actually, let's say 2 years ago, and then because of the pandemic you stopped. uh, you should remember what it's like running and everything, so you know how hard it is to do that. So getting back to it, you just have this innate belief that I just have to get back there, instead of would I be able to do it. And that is like another thing. It's a positive prejudice, whereas your body could have changed, a lot of things could have happened, and maybe you'll be able to do it, maybe you won't be able to do it. But the thing is, there is a research that essentially says that if you have done something in the past, then you're more likely to be able to achieve the same thing in the future. And that by that, I'm not saying if you haven't done it in the past, then you can't do it at all. It's just that that's the reason why sometimes people say people don't change. It's not that people don't change. People do change. You don't know how they will change. Whereas, if you know like something they've done, it's essentially it's like, let's say they did something great by like helping someone. Like, let's say a friend who always makes sure to like message, hey, like when you go home, message me. And if you forgot, they would actually like message you, hey, were you able to reach home? And those are people. Okay, first of all, they're lovely people. Second of all, you know, with them, you just have this like positive prejudice that uh, the next time if something happens, you do want to tell them, because but they have never proven it. They've just asked you, and but you just believe that if something does happen, they want to help. So yeah,
Nice. So, going off of how, you form different prejudices about different people, sometimes people teach you, sometimes it's based on experience, sometimes there is no experience at all and you're making a judgment. So one of the ways that a lot of people learn about the world that they don't get to see is through media. So what can media representation or representation on in just any form you can think of, movies, advertisements, so forth. I'm struggling to think of other ways. Books. How does representation in those ways relate to prejudice?
It definitely plays a role. For example, if a person, like for example, uh, usually like in America, like Indians didn't really have a lot of representation until like say like Priyanka Chopra was like the lead role in Quantico, and like then Deepika Padukone, she acted in the movie with The Rock. I forgot the name. Uh,
Me too.
and then what?
I forgot the name too. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So and then like now like there's Hassan Minaj, Lily Singh, a bunch of these people. Hassan Minaj has his own show. Lily Singh has her own show, and like Mindy Kaling, she used to act in like things like Office and Mindy Project, and now she has her own show in Never Have I Ever. And the thing is, by doing that, Americans understand like Indians better, whereas it was not just like Apu, which is a slightly problematic character, and you can actually go somewhere online to look this up, but don't go just yet. Let's like finish our point after the video. You can maybe check it out, and a lot of characters have gotten backlash. For example, in The Big Bang Theory, Rajesh Kutrapali, acted by Kunal, he got some backlash because there were certain things that was said in the show. But then his defense, which I'm not saying is right thing or wrong thing, I'm just saying which is they made jokes about like every ethnicity in every country. It's not that they're making jokes about just Indians. So so everybody has like different opinions on this, but essentially the biggest problem here is that. Especially, Ilakkiya, you can probably tell me more on this because you've grown up in America, right? So when you haven't seen enough representation, especially when you are a minority, where you don't really see a lot of people, and also people in the majority when they don't see people like minority people like ever. Essentially, the only times they understand who they are is like somewhere where they can see them, and the place where they can see them is usually through movies, TV shows, advertisements, like the huge list that Ilak has said earlier. So because of that, if over there it says this is all you have, then essentially they're going to believe that is all you have. And for example, Slumdog Millionaire, when it first came, uh, that was a huge hit. Everybody liked it. And then a lot of people also, after I went to America to study, they asked me a lot of questions. I haven't even seen the movie yet. I'm so sorry about this. But they asked me questions about like from the movie, like so how was this thing and how was that thing, and because I haven't watched the movie, I couldn't really give good answers. But essentially, it's like if I can assume America or like or anything in general. Like it doesn't have to be America, right? So any ethnicity or religion or whatever, like through one movie, if I'm able to do that, then wouldn't it just say like one story? Because the one thing that evolution has proved is that we are not just one thing, and we are like a lot more. And that's why there's even the slight tangent on this, which is evolution proves that there will always be people who won't believe in evolution because if you're saying if everyone would believe in evolution, that means they wouldn't be able to evolve into that side. So evolution proves it. So it's a similar thing with like representation. Representation proves that these people can do these things. For example, they don't have to be best friends. They can be the main character, or they don't have to be the villains. They can be the hero, or the heroes don't have to be here. For example, like usually with in Hollywood, like Russian characters and like I forgot like the other places where they usually like, get a villain from there. Whereas a villain can be just about anyone. Like villain doesn't have to have a thick accent and those sort of things, and that just paints people in a negative role when other people don't see them at all. This is the only information that they can go by, and prejudice, as we said, like are things that we have for survival. So if they like, sure, we can say, hey, like if you're exposed to them more, if you're not so ignorant, then you would actually learn that they're not that. But if when we don't know what they are, and this is the information that's given to us, then like wouldn't you also just for survival just be scared? Hey, let me just it's not that I'm trying to assume the worst, but I'm just trying to prepare myself for the worst. And that is why exposure is very important. That's why representation is very important. Sorry, I went on like long answer. What do you think, Ilakkiya?
Very good answer, comprehensive one, covered a lot of different points. And I guess for the first thing that you kind of directed towards me, what is it like to be uh, a minority in a country where the majority does not see a lot of representation of you? So uh, it, I am surprised that people asked you questions about Slumdog Millionaire. That's kind of sad that people just figured you'd have answers about that. And I get similar questions regarding how much, like, do I speak Hindi, or people assuming that I speak Hindi, because I feel like most representation that makes it to the US of the Indian country, or India, why did I say that? India. So it's mostly North Indian, right? It's Hollywood actors, North Indian actors and actresses. They're the ones who make it over. And because of that, people, I feel like most understanding of India, at least in America, comes from North Indian culture. The restaurants you see here are mostly North Indian. The you know, a lot of kids are North Indian. Not that that's true. Anyways, they make assumptions based on that. When South India is an entire half of the country that people have been ignoring and not realizing, and there's stereotypes like, "Oh, are you all vegetarian?" and where do those come from? Just a few characters, because when representation is not, I mean, it's hard to capture all parts of life, but that ability to capture various parts of life is already done for the majority population. Because when you have, well, in America, the white people are the majority, and you have white people acting in all kinds of roles in every kind of movie, right? You have the villains, the heroes, the rom-coms, the comedians, the superstar, the underdog. You have all of these different roles played by white people. So their representation is great. And it leads to the understanding of no single movie represents their entire race, or at least the American white population, because you see them in everything. But when you only see people of minorities represented in specific stereotypical roles, like Baljeet and Phineas and Ferb, or even in Never Have I Ever, it still portrays Devi as being a smart, studious, nerdy girl, which is, again, when you see Indian people in very specific roles, and not every role of villain to superstar and everything that I just mentioned, your prejudice is going to be based off of that, and you're going to have a specific belief or understanding of what are Indian people like. And that's why representation is really important and needs to get better, because it's not enough to just have an Indian person in your cast, or a minority person in your cast. What role are they playing, right? If you see most movies where there are people of color, they're not the protagonist of the movie. They're always a side character. They're the best friend. They're the comedian, but they're not really in the main lead. So that's why like your representation, it's not just having them there. It's what's the range of roles that they're being represented in. So it plays a really big role. And like you said, if that's the only way that people get to see people of different who belong to different groups, then it can lead to a lot of assumptions as well. Something we spoke about in our autism video was how if you're always portraying savants for with autism, what are your prejudices against people on the autism spectrum disorder who have very different range of abilities or behavioral changes? So it's a big cause of prejudice, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I want to say is like, for example, in your one of the points that you made, like with like the Indian cuisine, and then like, when they have like South Indian food, there's like South Indian cuisine, and whereas like like the middle part or like the northern part when they say it's like just like Indian cuisine, and for me that bugs me a little because like why is it just like or even like when with comedians like I forgot the name, but like people have made this where Tamil comedians called South Indian comedians Tamil comedians, whereas like Hindi comedians are called just Indian comedians, and so that is something that happens. And Hindi is actually like if you see like like native speakers, it's not even 50% of India. It could become 50% in the future. I'm not saying anything against it, but right now it's not. And in terms of vegetarian, India has the most vegetarians, but that doesn't mean India. Like if you look at the percentage, India has like more people who are not vegetarian, like like who eat meat, than just like vegetarians. And the thing is, how did you learn this? Because you probably learned that India is the country that has the most vegetarians. You probably learned that word, and you're like, oh, India, everyone in India like is a vegetarian. And so again, we are not saying prejudice is a wrong thing. Prejudice is like something that we do for survival. But of course, there are two sides to a coin, and I feel like we already do know like one side of this coin, which is like the negative side. So I don't have to go much into it. But yeah,
You know, that makes me think of a follow-up question because sometimes, depending on who you're getting questioned by, the the effect of it's sometimes seen as prejudice, sometimes it's not. So, for example, I was talking to someone the other day. She is like her family is Indian, and they were asking me about food in my college, and I asked the first question I asked her is, "Are you vegetarian?" Right? But I guess that was more in the context of food options and not me making an assumption. But I'm still asking her the question of, "Are you vegetarian?" Which could be perceived if I was a white person asking this to an Indian and I was asking, "Are you vegetarian?" It could be seen as prejudice. Oh, you think all Indians are vegetarian. So, what do you think about questions like that, where depending on who you're getting it from, it could be seen as prejudice or stereotyping versus not if you're part of the same group? Because prejudice is like assumptions
I
about a group,
mean
right? Go ahead.
that's true. And essentially, you're making prejudice there too. Like, essentially, what we're thinking is, like, okay, they probably know this already. So and then you go into the so they probably only know this, and that's why they're asking this question. So you like it prejudice can go both ways. As I said, like prejudice is a universal thing. It's not. It doesn't. Maybe discrimination can happen from prejudice, but doesn't discriminate. That's a universal thing. Everybody has prejudices. So so with that, like with your question, definitely, like one way I think I can understand it is like with a lot of my friends with whom I've had a lot of conversations about like a lot of different topics. I can't really remember them just by like the person he said this, but rather I have to remember it by the topic that we discussed. We just spoke a lot, so it's just hard for me if I have to like use the person as a base case as like the ID with which I have to remember all the conversations because it is way too much. Whereas at the start, like if I only had like two three conversations with you, I can probably remember that because I probably like met you twice, right? So uh, in terms of prejudice, this is sort of like a similar thing where depending on our experiences, we would look at it from different ways, and Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like with this, I want to ask you a question, which is, what are some prejudices that you've held when you were in high school, but you don't hold them anymore?
Um, Tough question. Got to think about it. Well, I guess an example I gave in a previous call was kind of being prejudiced against Black people as being more likely to steal my handbag because that was something that I was taught, and that is something now I've learned like that is not true at all. It is very discriminatory of me to kind of hold my purse a different way just because people of different races are around. So that's something I'm very glad to have moved past. Um, that was a thing um, that getting into maybe relationships like super young in high school is that I think I in high school I thought you're too young, it's a bad idea basically. But since seeing more friends in more relationships and seeing what are all the different ways it can make a person more mature, understanding, compassionate, like there's a lot of benefits to being in a relationship, like learning more about yourself, how to be with other people, learn not to be super prejudiced against that. I still think maybe high school's a bit young because you're still figuring out stuff, but you're always going to be figuring out stuff. So just be be wise while you're going about it. Um that salad was rabbit food, and that salad is a inferior form of food, but I now eat salads, so like it's not all the time, but still I recognize it as a good form of nutrition and green vegetables in my diet. So that is something that I've gone past. I guess those are some examples that I can think of right now. What about you, Akshay?
Well, I forgot I have to answer as well. Um, you're right. This is not an easy question to answer. Um, I'd say maybe with like because I was in India and then I came to America for my bachelor's. So in India, like public display of affection was not a thing. Whereas in America, especially in college, because like, in college nobody cares. So that was something I saw a lot, and I it became okay for me to like this sort of thing is like completely fine. And then one other thing is that I sort of learned is, for example, sometimes I observe things about people. Like let's say somebody has a spring in their step, that just like makes them sort of look like like that they're excited about something, that they're passionate about something. And when I see that, I wouldn't say anything about it, which is it was a positive thing. I could have shared that, and like, that probably would have made the day for them. But then the way I was thinking is like they probably just like would judge me for like observing them. But I just spend time with the person, man. And if you spend time with people, like you observe certain things, and but like I didn't really want to share those things. Whereas now, whenever I see something positive, like I do try to share it. So, for example, if I saw someone who's like being passionate and just like like moving around and just like so excited about something. And sometimes I even tell them, like, dude, like this is inspiring. Sometimes like I want to get to your level because like this is something that's like in my life it just like, seems really unprecedented. Even though like probably you do feel the same, but like I've never. For example, have you seen people who are excited about something, but then they wouldn't really make a like big deal out of it?
A lot, yeah.
I was that Yeah, I was that person. So I would be excited about something, but then I wouldn't want to, like voice it out much because, like, I know I'm excited, but then if I bring like a third person into this, or even a second person into this, uh, then I don't know how they're gonna react. Whereas this person, sometimes excitement is just infectious, and I've been like my days have been made sometimes just because like I saw someone who was like you're really happy. And so those are some things that I learned only after high school, that I can do those things. I'm allowed to do those things, because I thought if I say those things, I would be like seen in a negative way, but like that's not really the case. Don't ask me how why I thought those things. I was a high school student. Don't judge me. Uh,
I have a
and then
Go ahead.
yeah, go for it.
No, I just
No,
have
you
two
go
more
for it.
examples that I remembered, so I'll go when you're done.
Oh no, this gives me time to like think more. So like, you go for it.
Okay, so the PDA one, public displays of affection, that is also one that I had. I was like, why are you holding hands in public? Why are you hugging each other in public? Or are you kissing your partner in public? But yeah, gotten over that now, which is cool. And another thing that I was reminded of is changing in the locker room. So something that I was really afraid to do or against doing was just changing in front of other people. It was only women in my locker room, but I was still feeling weird to do that. I would always go to the bathroom stall with a closed door and then change there. But I guess I've gotten better with, I guess, body positivity in a way, accepting my body the way it is and realizing, people aren't always going to be judging you for the way you look, and people are just there to get out of their fancy clothes and into gym clothes before gym class. So that is something that I have gotten better about, and recognizing, I guess, the gendered clothing regulations or expectations that society has in terms of who's allowed to show what parts of the body, and realizing like, hey, there's a difference there. And if guys can go shirtless and for a run, I can change in a locker room full of women, and it doesn't matter. So those are two more examples I've thought of.
No, those are pretty good, and like it also you want to talk about body positivity. So like I'm glad, like from where you were in high school, like it's a good change. I would also say like I have talked about how Indians are perceived by Americans. So you should probably say the other way too, which is I thought like almost every American is like like sort of like a party person, whereas because essentially like Hollywood only showed New York, and like not even like all of New York, just like specific parts of it. And like like with the American dream and everything, there's a lot of things that like there's like a lot more nuance to it, whereas I just assumed it's not that big. And it's not also the fact that like grass is always green on the other side. So I really like looked at a lot of things which I felt like were very very green, whereas like that was not the case. And then one other thing in high school was probably the sort of things where in school I was like when somebody like does something like wrong, I would probably think it's because they have something against me. Whereas I've also understood now that sometimes these things just happen. They have their own interests, and they probably didn't even think about you. Like you are not even like one of the variables when they were taking a decision. Then they just happened to take this, and it just happened to affect you. They maybe if they knew they were going to affect you, they probably wouldn't have even done this. And whereas I took like a few things like personally bit, whereas I probably shouldn't have to like do that. And that also maybe comes from like like I have like a lot more sort of like self love, confidence, and like a lot of these things now. Whereas earlier, I would never say I didn't have self love. It's just more of I had my own self love. I also wanted other people's love. Whereas now it's more of like my opinions like matter to me a lot more than just like opinions in general.
Love that for you. So now we've kind of talked about what prejudices that we've had in the past and that have changed now. So while some of these might be, good prejudices to get rid of or bad prejudices to get rid of, what are the ways that we can get rid of prejudices that are negative, that are unjust, unfair, negative towards other groups, yourself or others? What are some of the ways that we can change our prejudices?
I would say exposure. Like seeing is believing, and for that you just need to see enough stuff. And for example, in a lot of I really like fiction books. I mean, now I read a lot more non-fiction, but I used to really like fiction books because with fiction, people get to say a lot of things where they don't have to go by the rules and prejudices that we have in this world, and they get to create their own thing. And because of that, a lot of times when aliens show up, right? So you would say, "Hey man, that guy has a weird nose, weird, and he just looks human-like, but like so different." And for some reason, aliens always look green. Uh, I don't know why go green. Maybe like that's why they're able to live because they have this go green policy. But anyway, because of these things, they're able to show like sort of the prejudice that we hold with. We just think like the humans that with the color that we see, with the shapes that we see, with the ear shapes and like nose shapes and all that we see. That's the right way, and then like anything else is like just like wrong. And so like these sort of things actually like, sort of told me that I mean not that I'm an alien, but like things can be different and things can still be good, and like that's something like fiction books, a lot of fiction books would talk about. And at first I didn't really think a lot about it. I just think it was a story, that was it. But then like when I got to know like why I don't judge a certain things, whereas like I probably should be judging them, but I don't. uh, I can definitely say this played a part in it. And that is just like a conceptually thing in general. But then as we said in like representation and like media with like movies, TV shows, like, when we see a lot more, especially when we because when maybe in like 100 years ago, or even like 40 50 years ago, like we probably didn't meet a lot of these people because we wouldn't see them because internet didn't really exist properly, or didn't exist at all. So we didn't really have a chance to do anything about this. So if you have a prejudice, I guess go with it, because like there's no way for you to get exposure to these things. That's not the world that we live anymore. We live in a world where if I want to make an Irish friend, I can find an Irish friend. Like I might have to like take a few steps, but it's not something like it's not an unimaginable thing. And that is the world that we live in now. Anything. I mean, I'm not going to say anything that we can imagine we can touch it. No, that's not the case. But in like a broad way, a lot of things have become possible, which were like things that we didn't even think were possible. And when it comes to exposure, we have come leaps and bounds, and there's so much we can have. And like we have like police shows, we have Law and Order, those sort of shows. We have comedy shows, we have action TV shows, we have adventure TV shows, we have anime, we have manga, and literally any type of content that you consume, any input, and that could be through people, that could be through media. Figure out what that is for yourself, and then once you figured out what that is, try to understand whether like what the good and bad prejudices there are. Like when you're going into it, like just list them all out. Good, don't list them out good bad right away. First, just list out all the prejudices that you think, these are assumptions that you make, and that could be from your life experience. Try to reflect on like why you believe each of these things. So once you're able to answer all those questions, is that just the truth? And you can probably find a list for this. Like for example, BuzzFeed might have like a list because BuzzFeed just has everything. Uh, and if BuzzFeed doesn't, like, I'm sure internet does. If Google has given us a great gift where you can search things and it can give us results in an instant. So maybe that's your homework for today or tomorrow, depending on when you see this.
Yeah, and that's pretty dope. That is really nice what you explained. And I would go along the same lines. exposure makes a huge difference in prejudices. A lot of the things that I noted that have changed from high school to college were because of exposure. I saw more people, I got to know these people. So instead of just judging them based on one trait, I got to know them more as a person. And then it's like, that isn't the defining characteristic. They are such a good person. This negative opinion I had of them because of something I saw them do, like, that is not such a negative thing actually, right? Because this person's a good person. So exposure helps a lot, and learning about things in many different contexts still, because if you kind of learn about a group, you learn about them through movies. We'll try reading about them in books, then try, finding YouTube blogs from that country, or uh, learn what it's like for the impoverished in that country. What are the languages like? Whatever it might be. I know I'm going on like a country learning people basis for prejudice, but whatever you're trying to learn more about, or whatever you recognize you might have a prejudice about, learn about it in a lot of different contexts, so you don't learn how you feel about it, what you believe about it, and how you think about it from just one source, but rather from a lot of different ones, which, similar to the example before with the representation, the more variety you have, the better you are equipped to rethink what you're up to, change your beliefs. It's really easy to set prejudices because all it takes is one experience, but to change it takes a lot of experiences. So it'll take time, it'll take effort, but for things that are negative and harmful, prejudices, it's time well spent.
Yeah, and I can actually give like one more example. I actually like, like when I was a lot more younger, Will and Grace was still a TV show that was still that's been there for a long time. So I watched it and I didn't really like it, and I kind of assumed maybe So the biggest that was pretty big because that was like that was saying representation about like LGBTQ and all that, and I thought I was maybe homophobic, and I didn't know like I didn't think that I was like I just assumed that I was homophobic because I didn't really like it. I didn't know why I didn't like it. So and it was just like not my cup of tea. But then and then I last I mean I then had got to have like gay friends, lesbian friends, and all that. So have met a lot of people. But then so after I met all these people last year, I actually watched Love Victor or Love Salman, like one of those shows. I don't remember the name exactly, but like so I watched that and I was actually able to finish the whole season, and that was actually good. So like that's when I knew that oh wait no I am able to do it. And it's not that I was homophobic earlier. It's just that I didn't really like the show. And like, to sort of judge that again, I watched Will and Grace again, and I'm sorry if you're a fan of Will and Grace, and like, it could be like the greatest show. I just didn't like it, and so maybe even through representation, like when you watch them, if you only have one show, that's also a problem because let's say with Quantico, where Priyanka Chopra was the lead actress, what if you don't like that show? Then what if you think you don't like Indians at all? If other people are not there, like other Indians are not there to let you know that maybe the show is not something that you like because shows that you like are subjective, and you shouldn't be asked to like a show just because it has great representation. And I mean, I'm that's also a thing with like with like when Wonder Woman came, that was like a big thing because everybody wanted you to like Wonder Woman, and that was like and because, for the right reasons because it said a lot of right things, but it also said essentially if you don't like it then you're against women, and that put a lot of pressure on people. So that's why we need representation because by enough representation, you get to hate hate movies, but not the people in there. And maybe hate is a very strong word, but like not liking.
Really good point. And with that, we can probably go to closing thoughts. So we spoke a lot about prejudice today, and I think we had a lot of good conversations, good points made. So, what are the closing thoughts you'd like to share with the audience about prejudice?
Uh, I just give a long answer, so I'll try to keep this one short. which is with prejudice. Don't associate prejudice as a bad word. Prejudice is something that we require to survive even now, but that doesn't mean it's okay for you to have unfair prejudices. So always keep reflecting till the day you die. The prejudices that you hold, do you have it for the right reasons? And the thing is, the place where you live, things change, and when things change, are you going with the change as well? Maybe one friend of yours, when in high school was like not great to you, but then they could become a lifelong friend when you meet them 10 years later. Give them the chance, give them a second chance, and at the same time, some people, you might think they don't deserve a second chance, and the world is big enough that you and them can live a long life even if you don't give them the second chance. So you know just for whatever you do, just know why you do it. If you don't, think about it.
That was very perfect. All the thoughts that I was having, you kind of put them together really well. Nothing much to add. Well, yeah, prejudice, you will have it for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, just identify which ones are there for good reasons, which ones are there just there because it's the place you're living in. Um, it is sometimes good to be different from the crowd if that's something you're just going along with in the moment. So think about why you have different prejudices, whether it's a good reason or not, and then determine whether it needs to be changed or if it can be kept. And try to talk to more people. It's always wonderful to get to know more people. The world's so big. So thank you everyone for watching this episode. And if you haven't, like and subscribe to our channel, share with your friends, and we will see you later.
Thanks for watching. For more discussions, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Also, make sure to like and comment more topics that you'd like to see us discuss. We'll see you next time.